Hi, my name is Kevin Sean, and I'll be presenting on the Keystone XL pipeline extension. So the Keystone pipeline system is an oil pipeline system running from Canada through the United States. Construction began in 2008 and the pipeline first became operational in 2010. Here's an image of the pipeline. It starts in Alberta, Canada, runs through the United States to the Gulf Coast. The XL extension was proposed in 2008 during the construction of the first pipeline. The XL extension would run from Alberta, Canada still to Nebraska, and from there it would join up with the existing pipeline. This extension would carry approximately 830,000 barrels of oil per day in a more efficient manner than the original pipeline could. So this would help the U.S. in its journey to become energy independent. Here's an image. The green is the existing Keystone pipeline, and the dotted red is what the extension would be. So as you can see, it covers less distance than the original pipeline and be more efficient. Construction of the XL pipeline has not begun yet. Since 2008, TransCanada, which is the company that produces the pipeline, has been working with the U.S. to secure approval to build and construct along the path. In February 2015, the House and Senate passed a bill approving construction of the pipeline. TransCanada got the approval it needed to build in the United States through all of the states that needed to pass through, and it was approved by the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. However, on February 24th, President Obama did veto the bill, and the Senate failed to override the veto on March 4th. So why did Obama veto the bill? He cited economic concerns and environmental concerns. Some economic concerns were the job creation that the pipeline would have generated, whether or not the XL extension would be an export pipeline to China and other nations, and potential local damages during the construction. So jobs created from the XL pipeline, there's been a lot of controversy over how many jobs would actually be created. The State Department estimated about 42,000 direct and indirect jobs. TransCanada, however, only estimated about 20,000, and Obama himself a maximum of maybe 2,000 jobs during the construction, and maybe 50 to 100 permanently after construction was done. So that's a very wide distribution of jobs created or potentially created. The export pipeline is also an issue. Many are afraid that the oil sent through the pipeline would not be made available for domestic use, but would instead be marketed overseas to China and other nations. So if this happened, one of the main goals of the pipeline to help the U.S. be energy independent would be null and void, essentially. So TransCanada, however, did refute this claim, and the State Department says that it would not be economically justified for the pipeline to be an export pipeline, but there is still some fear that that could have been an issue. Local damages. The construction is, of course, going to run through the United States and could affect farmland and homes. There have been reports of threats by TransCanada to confiscate private land and homes, so that's another major issue. The pipeline may run through and damage Native American lands. Also, the pipeline could potentially raise the price of gas in the Midwest, which would further hurt farmers and other inhabitants there. And there's the possibility of pollution and damages along the pipeline. Moving on to environmental concerns. A big issue is that the pipeline would be transporting tar sands oil versus conventional oil. There's also the issue of pollution and water contamination and the risk of oil spills. So the Keystone pipeline transports tar sands oil. Tar sands oil is, as you can see here, climate scientist James Hansen calls tar sands one of the dirtiest, most carbon-intensive fuels on the planet. Pollution from tar sands oil is 3 to 4 times that of conventional oil, so it's definitely a very major pollution risk. Also increased carbon emissions as well, so it's very, very damaging to the environment. Furthermore, during extraction and the refining process of tar sands oil, there's a lot of harmful byproducts that are produced. water from the extraction process becomes polluted with chemicals such as cyanide and ammonia, and if that water is not stored properly, it could seep into surrounding land and water, which could further damage the environment. Refineries produce emissions of toxic sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxide, and those lead to smog and acid rain. Refineries along the current pipeline already have very high pollution rates because of these emissions. So that's another major issue. Furthermore, the refining process also produces petroleum coke, which when burned produces more emission than coal. So definitely a very high pollution risk because of this XL extension. Oil spills are another very, very major problem. There's been a very well-documented history of pipeline oil spills, not just from the Keystone Pipeline, but from other pipelines across the US. And those spills and their effects on the climate and environment have been very well documented, as I've said. Tar sands oil is especially corrosive, which is the major issue here. Because the pipeline is transporting tar sands oil, this oil could potentially eat away at the pipeline, and because of that, the chance of spills becomes increasingly likely. Because safety regulations in the United States only account for conventional oil, the acidity of this tar sands oil has not been accounted for. And so that's another major issue. Because the safety regulations haven't been adjusted for this tar sands oil, the risk for oil spills is increased. Already, there have been 14 oil spills by the Keystone Pipeline since its operation in June 2010, so that's only over a span of 4 years. The largest was a 21,000 gallon spill in North Dakota. There's also been a 12,000 gallon spill in Arkansas that's still being cleaned up today. So there's a very high chance of an oil spill, and like a BP style type oil spill right in America's heartland in the Midwest would be catastrophic. There have been surveys and polls conducted about the Keystone XL extension, and it's actually been found that the majority of Americans do support the extension, despite the concerns. Here's one in 2012. As you can see, it's about a 60-30 split of whether or not the pipeline should be created. Here's one that shows the change in favorability from 2013 to 2014. And here is in 2015, another graph, and as you can see, it's still relatively a 60-30 split. So from 2012 to 2015, despite all the new knowledge that we've learned, it's still basically the same of supporters and opposers. So in conclusion, economically, it's difficult to assess the impact of the XL pipeline on the economy because of the variability in the jobs that might be created and whether or not the pipeline actually becomes an export pipeline. Furthermore, we can't really accurately assess the local damages that might occur because of the construction. And so economically, it's just very hard to tell how the pipeline is going to affect the United States. Environmentally, we can definitely conclude that the XL extension would be damaging to the environment and the climate because of the tar sands oil. So what now? Since President Obama has vetoed the bill approving the extension, of course construction did not begin, but Congress is still posing for the pipeline or similar alternatives. Green groups are of course still lobbying against the pipeline. TransCanada itself is searching for alternatives as well. They've already proposed plans for the extension of the pipeline in Quebec and other regions of Canada, but they have not as of yet proposed any similar sort of plan to build through the United States. So as chemical engineers, how can we impact what happens next? If the pipeline is not approved in the future or similar alternatives are not proposed in the future, how can we help the US become energy independent and self-sufficient? There are many alternatives to oil, such as solar, wind, hydroelectric power, that we could help develop, or we could even help optimize the oil refining extraction process to help minimize the pollution. So those are some alternatives that we can do. If the pipeline is approved or if something similar is approved in the future, how can we help protect the environment and the people who are going to be affected by the pipeline? So again, we could try to optimize the refinement and extraction process of the oil to make sure that the pollution and emissions are as minimal as possible. Another way is to make sure that there are regulations in place for the transport of tar sands oil and how that affects pipelines, and to make sure that we're not just set on the conventional oil. And that could very likely minimize the amount of spills that occur in the United States. As we said previously, there have been 14 spills in the past 4 years in the original Keystone Pipeline, and that's in large part because there haven't been regulations in place for tar sands oil. So if we can get those in place, I think that would minimize a lot of the risk in the possibility for a future extension. These are just some sources I used. Thank you.